Welcome back this weekend. Joining us for our marketing roundtable is Dan Basse as well as Matt Bennett. Dan, let's start off with South America. A lot of talk earlier in the week kind of fueled the soybean market, talking about frost in Argentina specifically and the impact it could have on that crop. But when you talk to your folks down in South America, did it do that much damage to the market overall?
Well, it didn't do that much damage to the crop. As we look at the amount of circles that were, let's say, below 33 degrees, it was less than 2% of the area in Argentina. And talking to farmers down there was a lot of cosmetic damage. So I think the market rallied on the perception that indeed there may have been some damage. We have all been trying to get our arms around how small is the Argentine crop, not because of the frost, but because of the drought. And so I think this just kind of piled onto that. Remember that supply-driven markets are always peaking when it seems like the supply is the lowest, and we may have seen that on Tuesday.
Yeah, speaking of that, Matt, it's not like that momentum in the markets lasted that long. We saw that on Tuesday, but a tough day when it comes to commodity prices, especially for grains and oil seeds on Thursday. So is this a mindset shift in the market, or what's driving it?
Well, I think a couple of things. When you saw the soybean meal market kind of run out of steam, as Dan said, I think folks want to kind of buy into this, but we weren't able to go ahead and approach those highs that we saw last week. And I think whenever you weren't able to get above and beyond those, you just ran out of buying interest, quite frankly. And so I think a few things are going on. We talked about this a little bit before, but maybe people are starting to look at balance sheets for new crop, and it's something that I've talked about. I know Dan's talked about a lot. But whenever you start looking, for instance, at corn, it's a different situation whenever you're talking about this current crop. If you do plant 91 or 2 million acres, and Mother Nature actually cooperates, you're looking at a completely different balance sheet moving forward. And I think maybe that's going to start to be more of the discussion than maybe, your South American weather situation.
Well, speaking of new crop supplies, speaking of acreage, USDA holding its outlook forum this week. A first look at acreage, but Dan, it's not like it's survey based, and so typically not a big market mover. But when you look at their first taste of acreage, really, that came out of Washington this week, what is it telling you?
Well, it's telling us that farmers want to plant more corn. We did see corn acreage rise to 91 million. Soybeans held steady at 87. We knew wheat already was going to be up because of the seedings number last January. But if I put corn, soybeans, wheat, and cotton together, I come up with about 238.9 million acres. Now, that's down from the 240.7 in the Outlook conference from the year ahead. Where we think there can be some adjustments on these numbers is going to be soybeans. This is the first year that USDA is offering a $10 an acre payment, if you will, for double crop soybeans as far north as, let's say, southern Wisconsin and southern Minnesota. And then you've got all these SRW wheat acreage that could be switched over to soybeans. So I think the soybean number could go up. I think corn is about right, but now it's all in the hands of Mother Nature. What is she going to give us for spring planting? This is probably a pretty good place to start, but it'll be tweaked as we go forward in months just due to Mother Nature.
Matt, what's agmarket.net's outlook when it comes to acreage?
I haven't come up with an official estimate yet, but soybeans certainly have been trying to do some work to buy acres. But at the same time, you got to ask yourself, what's the function of, for instance, fertilizer? I mean, if we're going to talk about swing acres, you got to tip your cap to the fact that dry fertilizer and anhydrous ammonia, nitrogen sources have all cheapened up over the last few weeks here. And I do think there's been some folks looking at the ratio of, how much corn they can sell versus buying that fertilizer on those swing acres. So I think 91 is a fair number. It might even be a shade over that. But I agree with Dan that there's probably a little upside movement potential for soybeans all winter long. I've been using 91 and 88. And quite frankly, I don't know that I'm too far away from those numbers. I don't think you can get much above 180 combined. So I think I'm pretty safe with where I'm at right now. But again, we haven't come up with our official estimate for the March planting intentions just yet.
Dan, some of these growers in areas like Oklahoma, Kansas, Panhandle of Texas, they're saying they lost some wheat acres this week. Blowing wind, cover crops, decimated cover crops, just some real challenges out there. So when you look at this wheat number, there was some arguments when USDA put out their initial acreage estimate saying all of that wheat may not make it, may not be harvested. Should there be a big adjustment there by USDA?
Well, there'll be an adjustment, but we're not going to get it until the May crop report. That's when they do their first survey based of the U.S. wheat crop. So we live what we live with today. We will get planting intentions on wheat, but what you're talking about, Tyne, is really harvested acreage, and that's all related to condition ratings in the 1st of April. So conditions are down in the plains, which I imagine they will be. based on data we've seen in prior months. I would imagine there'll be extra acres abandoned in the plains. But, world wheat prices are now down to the lowest level in a year. So, the Russians keep selling wheat, and that's kind of offsetting the bullishness, if you will, due to the plains dryness and drought that's still prevailing today.
Yeah, it's been a year since we saw Russia invade Ukraine. So, talking about the realignment of world trade, we'll get into that. Plus, a BSE case, atypical BSE case detected in Brazil. What impact is that having on cattle prices? We'll talk about that coming up on U.S. Farm Report.